Well, we're here tonight to talk a little bit about endangered species in preparation for Racing Extinction, the film that you're here to see tonight. And with me is a very remarkable individual. Some of you were here to hear him speak over the last couple days. But Mike Phillips is, he's a state senator from Montana.
Frightening thought, isn't it?
Yeah.
Frightening thought.
He's one of the most brilliant people I've met on species conservation, and he is the director of the Turner Endangered Species Fund, which is the only privately funded endangered species fund in the world. And they have been working on, and I will let Mike tell you more about that, but they have worked on over 20-some species and have brought many back from literally the brink of extinction.
Yeah, well, that was all too easy. That was just all too easy.
So before we get started in our conversation, I just want to say that I'm sitting up here tonight as, yes, the president of AREI, but more importantly, I'm a patron of nature for the IUCN, which is the International Union for the Conservation of Nature. And it's the largest scientific organization in the world. And one of its primary missions is putting together, when they started this in 1964, when they were established, is putting together a list of all the endangered species in the world. Their last list was published in 2012, and it had 19,815 species that are in 3 different categories, from being vulnerable all the way to on the brink of extinction. Now this is, okay, so why is that happening? There are some really obvious reasons, and they're documented by science. One is, number one, the loss of habitat. Number 2 is toxins and poisons, herbicides, pesticides. The third thing is a lot of petrochemical waste, solid waste, and oil spills, particularly in the ocean. And a lot of invasive species, because things are changing with climate change, and other species move into indigenous species habitats. And that happens both with terrestrial species as well as with marine species. Now I want to give you a couple facts here from IUCN. And well, before I do that, the list is separated by mammals, birds, amphibians, fish, insects, mollusks, and plants. So those are the categories. And they put the master list for the world together, sometimes by nation, and then they put the nations in regions. And that's how they get the composite list. 41% of those 19,818 species, 41% of all the amphibians are endangered. 30% of the coral reefs are endangered. 30% of all conifers, 13% of birds, and 25% of all mammals. Mammals including whales. So right now, their campaign is they're trying to categorize all the bumblebee species. There's 250 bumblebee species in the world, and they have 200 more to categorize. And of course, we know what's happening to our pollinators. So all of these reasons for extinction can be fixed. Decline in habitat, of course, we can make the decision. Just as Jeremy was saying, we have the choice. We can make the decision. And corridors is one way to do that. We fragment our habitats. And we need to link those habitats together, because species don't stop at the border of a national park or a state. They could care less. You know, they need large landscape protection. And they need it also elevationally. So it's not just horizontal, it's lateral as well. Toxins and poisons. You know, we have a couple real experts in this room about this, and we can get rid of those. There are alternatives. Agriculture is another one. We don't have to do huge corporate farms. There's the organic farm movement is going gangbusters. You know, and there's different ways. There are different ways to farm now. No-till, all kinds of ways to farm that actually work and can produce the amount of food that is needed. We can also take care of petrochemicals, plastics, solid waste. We had a great conversation around that today on the women's panel, on our consumerism. All of these things we can fix. That's really the good news. That is really the good news. So with that, I want Mike to tell you a little bit about his work over the years, which is really quite spectacular. And he's been involved with gray wolf introduction, one of the first people in the country in Yellowstone to be involved with that, and he still is, along with all these other species.
Thank you. Can you guys, I assume that everyone can hear me just fine. I want to start by saying, Jamie, thank you for your work. Storytellers are important. They always have been. They always will be. Louis, your film is important. Thank you for making it and pushing the envelope of acknowledgement about the extinction crisis. I need a clicker. Where would I find a clicker? I'm going to show some pictures. I'm afraid to get up for fear of getting unhooked. And if you guys can help me get to the first picture, do I just point it at you guys and off we go? Whoops. Okay. I caught my first gray wolf for recovery and restoration purposes in 1980. That was 35 years ago. I've been involved with wolf recovery and conservation on a nearly daily basis ever since. Now, about 20 years ago, I had enough sense to join Team Turner. And we launched the Turner Endangered Species Fund and the Turner Biodiversity Divisions. You guys can read the mission statement. Simply, we aim to make a difference on behalf of species that are imperiled. Since then, we've done a lot of work. Team Turner is nothing if not active. All of these species, eastern indigo snake, I see a wood stork and a western pearl shell mussel, the swift fox, we've worked on all of those. The gopher tortoise, we just received over the last 2 years over 200 tortoises for restoration of the Avalon Plantation in northern Florida. All of these animals would otherwise have been buried alive. Legally buried alive. Well, they're not going to be buried alive. They're going to find a great home at the Avalon Plantation in Florida. We've been especially active with these species. We have launched the world's largest effort to restore red-cockaded woodpeckers, the world's largest effort to restore West Slope cutthroat trout and Rio Grande cutthroat trout. We just finished the world's most successful effort ever on behalf of desert bighorn sheep. Oh, and gee whiz, we have the nation's largest recovery project on behalf of the Chiricahua leopard frog. But it doesn't stop there. We are the only game in town for this species, the Troubadour spring snail. Now, what you see is a rock with a bunch of little bitty black dots. Those black dots are about the size of the tip of a sharp lead pencil. That's very helpful, thank you, Chip. Now I can see what you guys see. Well, that rock is covered up by Troubadour spring snails. Nobody cares about the Troubadour spring snail. Team Turner does. We believe that all of creation matters. I certainly wouldn't want to be standing at the pearly gates trying to explain to God why I turned my back on the Troubadour spring snail. I bet you a nickel God likes Troubadour spring snails. Right? But it doesn't stop there. We recorded recently on, I believe we can see the timestamp, the 3rd of November 2008. The first black-footed ferret born in the wild in New Mexico in some 60 years at Vermejo Park Ranch in northern New Mexico. But it doesn't stop there. This little guy, 09DW1. 09DW1 is about that big. 09DW1. 09 stands for 2009. DW stands for deep well, the area where this bolson tortoise was found. And number 1, well, gee whiz, number 1 is obvious. 09DW1 was the first bolson tortoise born in the wild in the continental United States in the last 15,000 years. Our bolson tortoise project aims to restore a Pleistocene relict. The bolson tortoise is extinct in the wild, accepting our work and a small, insecure population in an area of central Mexico defined by the drug trade. Through our work, we know that every year thousands of species disappear at the hand of man. The losses are so severe that the redundancy and certainty of nature is being stripped away, exhausting the lives of millions of humans and non-humans. The extinction crisis is quite simply one of humanity's most pressing problems. The gravity of the crisis will be made clear by tonight's film, Racing Extinction. But as a setup, let's think more about the extinction crisis. It's important to appreciate the scope of the crisis by accepting one very unfortunate fact. During an extinction crisis, all the survival bets are off. The normal Darwinian rules of the survival game don't apply. The very notion of Darwinian fitness is rendered moot. Species that actually make it out of an extinction crisis aren't so adapted as simply lucky. Now imagine a destructive force that is so pervasive, so overwhelming, that survival of the fittest, that tried and true approach for life marching inexorably in the direction of persistence is rendered totally irrelevant. That's a most powerful force. That force, that destructive force, draws its energy from the seemingly endless domestication of the planet to advance one aim: the prospects of humanity. That's it. That's the extinction crisis in a nutshell. We are at once the problem and the solution. Now, Sally asked me to speak briefly about the Endangered Species Act, and that simple fact that we are at once the problem and the solution is the foundations for the Endangered Species Act, which is arguably the world's most important legislative expression of stewardship. Why? Why is the law so important? Because it is uniquely demanding. Your Endangered Species Act mandates that the Secretary of the Interior, and to a lesser extent the Secretary of Commerce, it mandates that the Secretary develop lists of threatened and endangered species. It mandates that the Secretary develop plans for recovering those species to at least a semblance of their historical commonness and security. It's demanding because it mandates that recovery criteria. Here is the central feature of the act that most matters. It mandates that recovery criteria be based solely on the biological needs of the species in question, based on the best available science. Now, you can consider economic consequences of recovery when you're planning for actions to achieve recovery, but economic consequences are not considered when you decide what recovery is. Congress has consistently held that while there's lots of workarounds for potential negative economic consequences from recovery, you know what? There is no workaround for extinction. It is absolute, it is forever, there is no workaround. In essence, the law mandates that we right our wrongs. Now, I'm honored to be on this stage tonight for several reasons. Sally is a friend of mine. She's a hero of mine. The extinction crisis is important. Louis' film is of paramount importance, and we need your help. So here's the pitch. Here's the pitch to all the Coloradans in the room. We need your help. One of the most inspiring ways to work under the Endangered Species Act is to restore extirpated populations, populations that have been destroyed. We need your help restoring an extirpated population of an imperiled species. Sally, Laura, Chip, myself, Rutherford, John R., we need your help restoring a population of imperiled species. We need your help restoring the gray wolf to western Colorado. So here we go. Here we go. It's edgy. It's exciting. Hang on. It will defy any time limit. I'll go fast. As you may know, recovery of the gray wolf is a controversial and divisive issue. Consequently, the species remains extirpated across about 90% of its historical range in the United States, despite an abundance of suitable habitat. As functional members of Colorado's wildlands, gray wolves have been gone for decades. They haven't made it back, and they're not going to make it back without our help. Over the last year, Sally and Laura and Chip and Rutherford and John and others have joined with me to take up the restoration challenge. Our work is based on the belief that the 2016 election season is ideal for advancing restoration via a citizens' ballot initiative. So for you folks that are in Colorado, this now becomes uniquely germane. Our work is based on that premise. We've made great progress. We've assembled nearly all the assets that we need to launch the campaign, but we need your help. We need your help closing the last bit of the gap, the small gap remaining to launch the effort. And time is of the essence. We have to close that gap by early September of 2015 to leave enough time for a campaign that we can be proud of. Now, we take great satisfaction in our intent to use an inherent strength of our great country, local direct democracy, to right the wrongs that have been mercilessly foisted upon the gray wolf. We take satisfaction in knowing that our ballot campaign will be based on the decidedly American principle that ours is a government of the people, by the people. A wolf population in Colorado would serve as the last piece of a 40-year effort that we've been painstakingly following to restore the gray wolf from the high Arctic to the Mexican border. There is no other place in the world where you can imagine large carnivore conservation over such a sweeping landscape. Moreover, and perhaps even more importantly, the ballot campaign would give us countless opportunities to speak about the extinction crisis, to speak on behalf of imperiled species that have no voice, to literally speak on behalf of creation. Whether you're a person of faith or not, you can't deny that the creation is absolutely magical. Speaking on its behalf with films like Raising Extinction and advancing the notion to restore gray wolves to Colorado is very important. We need your help. If you're at all interested in this crazy idea that we're going to do, please see me or Sally or Laura or Rutherford or John afterwards, and we'll figure out how to get you involved. But thank you for coming tonight. Louis' film is of paramount importance. It's a beautiful film. You will not be disappointed. And Sally, thank you for letting me join you on stage.
Absolutely. We've got 2 minutes left.
Wow, 2 minutes.
And I want to add a couple things here. I was a resource policy analyst for the Wilderness Society. And during that time in the 70s and 80s, I actually hiked most of the areas and drew a lot of the boundaries for the areas that are now wilderness in Colorado. And thank you. And helped on pieces of legislation to get those areas protected, legislatively protected in perpetuity, and also wild and scenic rivers as well in the state of Colorado, because it's the same thing as far as species go. Now, wolves and grizzlies. You probably didn't know that Colorado had grizzly bears. In fact, in the South San Juan Mountains, up until 1957, there was actually a named grizzly refuge. The last grizzly was 22-year-old sow. After they had decommissioned this refuge, and they said absolutely no grizzlies are left. And there was one old landowner down there, and boy, he wouldn't let anybody through his gate, and I kept knocking on the door, and he finally let me in. He said, there's grizzlies here. And I put it in my report. And I got in a lot of trouble for doing that because nobody believed me. Lo and behold, this 22 sow, maybe the very last grizzly, was shot in a very unusual circumstance. They never really figured out exactly what happened. And that was the last one. And that was in 1980, mid-80s. Mid-80s. Now the gray wolf. The gray wolf was the last place in Colorado. Well, there were two last places. One up on the northern boundaries with Wyoming and down in the South San Juans. And that's why we pushed so hard to get that area protected. And over the course of the political process of trying to protect that area, we lost almost 100,000 acres of the original boundaries that we drew. Whittle through the political process. So what Mike is saying, it is absolutely imperative to show up for species because they don't have any voice.
No, they don't.
You do. Thank you very much.
Thank you.